Welcome to Comfort Crime with Lindsay Sanchez, a cozy mystery podcast where no actual crimes have been committed. Today, we'll continue with Bodies at Brunch, Chapter 2. Sienna didn't want much, just a friend or two in the sprawling, unfamiliar city of London she now calls home. Between juggling two small children, a busy husband, and the quietly crushing feeling that she'll never quite measure up, she's running low on hope. Until she stumbles into a group of women who feel, against all odds, like they might just be her people. But when their weekly gathering turns deadly, fitting in is the least of Sienna's problems, because one of her new friends might be a murderer. If this is your first time here, welcome! And please start with Chapter 1. For everyone else, we'll head to Chapter 2. But first, an update. When it came time to choose a setting for Bodies at Brunch, London was a complete no-brainer. Of course, England is practically synonymous with the cozy mystery genre. I know they pretty much invented the art of a charming tea-soaked whodunit, but for me, it was also personal. My very first trip across the Atlantic landed me in London, and that city grabbed me by the heart and simply refused to let go. It's been a solid decade since I've wandered those streets, but the 6 weeks I spent gallivanting through museums and markets are burned into my memory like the best kind of plot twist. The one you didn't see coming but feels absolutely inevitable in hindsight. While there, I ate my weight in chocolate digestives, consumed heroic quantities of bread and cheese, and haunted every market stall I could find. It was life-changing, not to be overly dramatic or anything. And this week in the newsletter, I'll dig a little deeper into my time across the pond. A few stories and maybe a picture or two for good measure. If you're loving comfort crime, think about supporting the show. Join the newsletter, leave a review, or send us along to a friend. There are so many ways to show your love, and I appreciate every single one of you more than you know. All right, that's all for now. Let's get on with the story. Bodies at Brunch, Chapter 2. The high-pitched wail coming from the peroxide blonde chilled Sienna to her core. It wormed its way through her sweater and right under her skin, stopping the blood in her veins. Rhea, Anne-Marie, and Missy leaned in, all jostling around Vivian and Chloe for a look through the crack in the silver door that led to the kitchen. Only Sienna and Darby stayed back. Between the crash, the following silence, and now Vivian's scream, Sienna had little doubt as to what she'd find if she looked behind the swinging steel door. When Vivian finally stopped screaming, Chloe dropped her sensible black briefcase on the floor. "Let's get you out of here." She put her arms around Vivian, who looked on the verge of tears, and guided her back to the dining room. One by one, the other women followed. Rhea clasped Anne-Marie's hand. Missy swore, as if she were cursing Bryant's body as she passed. Darby let go of Sienna's sleeve, her eyes bigger than ever, behind her magnifying glasses. Her short hair quivered as she shuffled after the others. Sienna stayed, frozen in the hall, alone again. She couldn't decide if she should follow Darby's example and walk away, or if she should open the door and see what Vivian had, what everyone else but Darby had. It would be her first dead body. Unlike her cop dad and true crime-obsessed sister, who always seemed to find trouble, Sienna had never come face to face with death, not once in her 27 years. She didn't know if reality or her imagination would be worse. She didn't know which would be more likely to keep her up at night. If she was really honest with herself, she knew she should walk away. There were things you couldn't unsee, images that would stay burned in your mind long after you wanted them gone. But deep down, she had to admit that not seeing and always wondering would be worse. Closing her eyes, she prayed she wasn't making the wrong choice as she pushed her fingertips to the cold metal door and took a step forward. She took another and another, pushing the door wide in front of her until the kitchen was fully visible from where she stood in the hall. Bryant, the rude server, lay face down on the counter, his lifeless limbs hanging over the edge. Fallen copper pots scattered around him, on the counter, on the floor. A broken shelf hinged crooked on the wall. His gray-flecked black hair splayed out around his head. A dark liquid pooled on the white marble. Splatters of the same dark red on the wall and floor next to him. Sienna recoiled on impulse, but when the wave of repulsion faded, she leaned in. As a kid, she'd secretly wanted to be a forensic scientist, like the ones they'd studied in the true crime stories when she and Georgia had become obsessed. For her sister, they had been all about the puzzle. She'd always tried to solve the crime from a people perspective. But Sienna had always liked the science more. Then, when she'd met Daniel and decided to start a family with him, she'd pushed that dream way down into the deepest, darkest corner of her soul. That secret dream was so buried, she'd almost forgotten it existed. But there, alone with Bryant's body, the part of her she thought had died long ago resurfaced. Faced with violence and gore, Sienna, mother of two, aspiring fashionista, she didn't want to run or throw up. She wanted to know what happened. She studied the body without disturbing anything. He'd been hit over the head with something hard. Blunt force trauma. If she were home in her little Rocky Mountain town of Dogwood Lake, she'd know exactly what to do. She'd call her dad, or even Georgia, after she called the chief of police, of course. But here, the only thing she knew about the British police was that they were maybe called Scotland Yard. If only she'd known that morning to study what to do when you find a dead body, instead of in which hand to hold one's fork. It was time for her to go back to the table, time to sit with the other ladies and wait. For decency's sake, she should let that metal door close behind her and go back to her chair between Anne-Marie and Chloe. For decency's sake, she would. Soon. As soon as the police came, she'd put that old Sienna back in whatever box she'd been in, close the door on this dead body, and never think about being a forensic scientist again. But now, just for a moment, knowing she probably shouldn't, and that she would probably never get a chance again, Sienna took another step. The man's face had landed in a blueberry muffin, his hand still clutching what looked like was once a chocolate croissant, and the puddle of liquid on the counter she could now see was spilt tea mixed with his blood. The blow had likely come from behind, from something heavy, like one of the pots. Squinting at them, she searched for signs that one of them could be the murder weapon. All the bottoms gleamed clean, except for the few splashes of tea and blood that had made their way past the counter. But amid all the brassy warmth, something silver lay at the man's feet, something silver and beautiful and big. She bent closer, careful not to touch the body or any of the surrounding pots. Ria's candlesticks. One of them dripped with what could only be blood. Sienna couldn't hold back her gasp. Ria? It didn't make sense that she'd be involved. Anne-Marie, Vivian, even Darby, maybe they all had a connection with him, but Ria? Regardless of who it might be, the fact that one of the candlesticks was clearly the murder weapon, the fact that they were in there, dripping and discarded, it made it perfectly clear that one of her new friends was a murderer. Suddenly, spending her mornings in the flat alone in this big anonymous city didn't seem quite so bad as it had a day ago. A creak in the far corner of the kitchen made Sienna look up. A door opened, one she hadn't even noticed. So much for paying extra attention to details. She ducked down behind the counter, her heart racing, blood pounding behind her eyes. If there was another door, that meant her new friends might be innocent, and whoever was on the other side might be the killer. On instinct, Sienna wrapped her fingers around the nearest pan. Staying low, she inched to the end of the counter and peeked around the edge. The door opened more. Someone in black leather and an opaque motorcycle helmet stepped in. They stopped. Sienna couldn't see their face, but the way they stood there, the image of Bryant's body reflecting in the dark visor, it was like they were stunned. Almost like they were just as shocked as the rest of them had been. Sirens blared, the wail so loud the police couldn't be more than a street or two away. The person in the door tilted their helmet, registering the noise. They hesitated, then backed out, their visor never straying from the body on the counter. Sienna had three choices. She could stay where she was, crouched in the kitchen, a dead body looming over her, his blood splattered around her, clutching a copper-bottomed pan for dear life. She could put the pan down, go back to her new, maybe murderous friends, and pretend like none of this had happened. Or she could follow the mystery person out the back door and maybe, just maybe, find out something useful. A motorcycle engine rumbled to life. In a split second, before she'd really decided, before she'd even thought all the way through what she was doing, Sienna stood, her legs carrying her out the back door and into a small alley. The person in black straddled a big blue motorcycle. They paused for a second when they saw Sienna step out, then kicked up the stand and sped away, blasting grit into Sienna's face as they passed. She stared after them, trying to memorize the plate number on the back of the bike, scanning the person for any identifying details, knowing everything she saw was flowing like sand through a pasta sieve. The gaps of her knowledge of what in the world had just happened were too big for her to hold on to anything besides the most basic information. The bike was blue. The leather was black. Beyond that, the only thing she'd be able to tell the police was that someone had been there. Letting the pan fall lifelessly to her side, she went back to the kitchen door and turned the handle. Locked. She tried again. The worn brass knob wouldn't budge. Great. Not only had she been alone with the body, the only one to see the mystery person, and locked in the back alley, she was still holding a piece of the crime scene. If she kept on this path, the police and her new friends would think that she was the one responsible for the body on the counter. Walking around the side of the building, Sienna headed for the front door, switching the heavy pan to her other hand. Her only comfort was that though she'd messed things up pretty badly after the murder, she was the only one who hadn't left the table until the body was found. And she'd never met the guy, not to mention she had no reason to kill him. Everything would be fine. She walked past the 3 police cars parked at the curb, their lights still flashing. She'd just tell them exactly what had happened, and everything would be perfectly fine. Before opening the front door and facing the police, Sienna slipped out her phone and texted Daniel. She didn't know how long this would take, but murder or not, someone would need to pick up the kids. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a mystery-loving friend, or consider leaving a review on your favorite podcast player. Most of all, thank you so much for being here today. I loved it, and I'm already excited for next week.